some people have written to us and they said, look, you're not going to have a policeman with a gun knocking on your door accompanied by a doctor with a syringe. They haven't got the resources to do that. How actually could they enforce it if they wanted to? How could it happen? What would be the sanctions which they have?
Well, the French government released or circulated to the heads of departments an internal document of 19 pages which outlined quite clearly their method. And this is what I assume is happening in every country. They're going to set up vaccine centres that are outside hospitals and GPs. Some of these are going to be secure. People are going to be told to go there first of their own free will, and then they're going to receive calls, whatever, telling them to appear at a certain time. Then those people who do not come are going to eventually be collected and forced to go there.
Do the resources exist to actually do that? Because you're talking about transporting and enforcing and rounding up and making contact with hundreds of thousands of people, and possibly many more than that.
Well, absolutely. If so many people refuse, it will be impossible. But if they are assuming that the vast majority of people will either go of their free will, or when they get the call from, say, a police authority telling them to appear, or the notification, they will go reluctantly, but they will still obey that call. And the number of people who will actually refuse to go and stay at home when they're informed it's a criminal offence not to go will be very small, and it will be a criminal offence not to go. However, if it turns out that hundreds of thousands and millions refuse to go, then they cannot carry it through. And that's why it's important for every single person to say no and not to go along with it.
This is Bill Ryan from Project Camelot, and I'm here in Vienna on the 8th of September 2009. I happen to be in Vienna because I've just returned from a conference in Poland, and I have just met Jane Burgermeister, who up until now has been a figure shrouded in mystery. And it's my great pleasure to introduce you visually to the world here by being the first person in the internet community to have made a trail to find out, and here I'm going to make a joke, whether you really exist or not, and I can demonstrate to everyone that you truly do. What, may I ask, Jane, was your response when you realised that you had an opportunity to basically to give a message to the world on camera, which is what I want to support you in being able to do?
Well, thank you, Bill, for, as I say, taking the trouble to come all the way here. And it's a bit off the beaten track here in Vienna. It is, however, a significant place, as it turns out. It is the place where Baxter contaminated 72 kilos of vaccine material with the live bird flu, and so nearly triggered a global pandemic just a few months ago in February. This attempt to trigger a pandemic failed because of the alertness of people in the Czech Republic who detected it in a laboratory in biotest. However, it has now turned out that Baxter still has at least a large amount of that 72 kilos of bird flu, and we're coming to a point where we have only perhaps a few weeks until the government here in Austria and other governments around the world intend to start injecting people with so-called swine flu vaccine material, which we have every reason to fear is going to be a big hazard to our health, and has been designed to be a hazard to our health, even if it isn't contaminated with the live bird flu virus, as it might well be. So my message that I want to give to people, if I can give any message, is that time is running short, that we all of us now have to recognize the scale of the threat and danger to us individually and collectively, and we need to take steps and organize to stop this mass vaccination program as soon as possible.
And as we were discussing when we were just chatting before we started this video interview, you feel a tremendous sense of urgency, don't you? This is driving you right now.
Well, unfortunately, we have seen how, in spite of mounting and growing protests in the USA and now in Europe, the latest polls show that 29% of the Germans are categorically going to refuse the swine flu vaccine. In spite of all that, the governments are pressing ahead relentlessly, who is pushing with tremendous determination this unwanted, unnecessary and dangerous program on us, and it's coming in just a few weeks.
What's interesting to me is that we, like you, get reports from all over the world, and it seems that governments in every first world nation, and maybe other nations too, seem to be preparing in almost like marching in step with this thing. This is coordinated, isn't it?
Absolutely, and if you look at the legal framework, they are all following the same legal framework, and it's the International Health Regulations of 2005, which give WHO, the World Health Organization based in Geneva, the power to control how governments respond to this pandemic, which WHO has itself declared. And every country has a more or less identical pandemic plan, which hands power over to the World Health Organization, which allows the World Health Organization to take over the police and the health forces. And every country will set up a crisis committee, which will determine, what vaccine centers are established, what groups are going to be targeted for vaccination, and so on. And that is the reason why it's so coordinated and synchronized, because there is a single body behind it, and this is the World Health Organization, the UN, and the people who back that, the banking cartel and family dynasty, the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds.
Now, let's just back up a moment here, and for those people watching this video who don't know who you are and why we should be talking here in Vienna, can you just give a little bit of your background? The things that you shared with me personally, for instance, I didn't even know that you were at university in Edinburgh, how long you've been in Vienna, what you're doing here, and just a little bit of a bio. How did you get to this place? Sometimes you must wake up in the morning asking yourself the same question. How did you get here?
Well, my dad is Austrian and my mother is from Ireland, and I was born in Switzerland. And I went to Edinburgh University, where I did English literature and language and a bit of philosophy and so on. And I came to Austria in the year 2000, and I started working here as a medical journal for or as an editor for a medical journal specializing in diabetes. And I quit that of my own free will and started writing for medical wires, the Reuters Health, for the British Medical Journal, The Scientist, Nature, and so on. And so I acquired an understanding of the medical field and how to do research in this area. And then I eventually moved into renewable energy, because I believe it's a tremendous potential for humanity. Until one day, this winter, a neighbour showed me the report in a local newspaper saying that Baxter had contaminated this vaccine material, and 36 people had to go to hospital to be treated preventatively for the bird flu. And then, of course, I understood this was a tremendous threat, and that because biosafety level 3 regulations are in place in these sort of facilities, it can't have been an accident.
So your experience gained as a medical journalist immediately helped you to realise that something very unusual and important had happened here, is that right?
Absolutely,
right.
Absolutely. And I also felt confident about doing the research into it and filing charges, which I did eventually. Because of that background, I had done quite a lot of work in that field, so I felt confident I could handle it.
Okay, now, something which I do want to ask you is that many people have understandably asked the question, who is this woman and where does she come from out of nowhere? And I can resonate with that, because people say that about us, and people feel sometimes an understandable sense of territoriality. It's like, wait a minute, this is my area, or wait a minute, I've been researching this for 20 years, or where's this newcomer come from? Now, were you conscious of the fact that when you started to write about this stuff, people would be saying, who is this person? We never heard her name before.
I have to be honest and say my concern was to try and stop and publicize what I saw as a big crime and threat. I was very concerned that there was no publicity, no action being taken by the Austrian government, and that Baxter could release this material the day after.
And it should have been news headlines all over the world.
Absolutely.
It was underwhelming, wasn't it?
It was underwhelming, and that created the risk that they were just going to repeat the same maneuver, and a pandemic was going to be ignited. And because I myself had come to realize that the media was totally controlled through my own experiences working in the media, I didn't make too much effort in trying to alert the newspapers. I sent a story or the pitch to the BMJ. The editor wasn't interested. I wasn't too surprised.
That's the British Medical Journal.
Yes, for which I have worked. The Lancet wasn't interested. I sent it to the Austrian papers, no response. Profil, an Austrian magazine, actually wrote an article whitewashing Baxter, in spite of all my information. And so, as an individual, I saw very few opportunities for halting this mechanism or truck that seemed to be hurtling towards, unleashing a pandemic. So I filed criminal charges in the hope of putting a spoke in the wheel and forcing an investigation. I'd never done that before. And
did you have professional help in doing that? Because I wouldn't know how to start filing charges against anybody.
Yes, to be honest, a lawyer did tell me I had to file criminal charges and where to go, and sort of the basic laws. So I did get that advice. On my mother's side of the family, there were some lawyers, and so my mum too was very good at kind of legal reasoning and stuff like that. And so I decided to give it a shot. I'd never done it before, but I thought I might as well give it a try. The evidence is there, it's just a question of laying it out clearly. So that's what I did, and the police did start investigating.
Is it the police here in Vienna?
Yes,
right? Yeah.
yes. And my understanding is that 3 police forces are investigating: the police in Vienna, the police in Korneuburg, and the Unit for Protection of the Constitution and Fighting Terrorism was also investigating, and I know that for sure because I was summoned there for an interview. However, what has alarmed me is the fact that nothing has happened. The government is continuing to press ahead with its program of mass vaccination with these Baxter vaccines. There are no security checks in place to ensure that the material isn't contaminated. The situation is such that I might as well never have filed the charges. And last week, the head of the Unit for Protecting the Constitution and Fighting Terrorism was forced to resign, it seems, and replaced by somebody who appears to be much more loyal to the powers that want this vaccination program to go ahead. The same is true of the Austrian criminal police. The head was replaced by somebody who also has a track record of working for these so-called New World Order corporations. And so I increasingly feel the structures in government are not going to be effective in stopping and halting this danger, and that's why we have to now move towards organized civilian resistance to the vaccines.
But you must be encouraged, because parallel with your metaphorically waking up that morning to realize that, wait a minute, what's wrong with this picture? There's something happening that shouldn't be. A lot of other people all over the world have been becoming very aware of this and very active. You must be feeling heartened by that, yeah?
Absolutely. I mean, the response has been amazing and exponential. It's just every day it's amazing to see the progress, and today I heard that the Greek police are going to refuse and have officially refused to take the vaccine, which is quite a significant milestone. This is the police force which the government will rely on to force the Greeks to take a vaccine, because according to polls the Greeks do not want to take the vaccine. So eventually it'll come down to the government having to either force them or try and frighten them into taking it by triggering a pandemic, and that's just one example. Germany, there's enormous resistance, and so is there in France, not to mention the USA, and increasingly in the UK. Unfortunately, my language skills are limited. I don't speak Spanish or any other language, so I'm only able to track and monitor what's happening in the countries where I speak a bit of the language, which is France, Germany, and English-speaking countries.
I just came back from Poland, where I gave a talk about a whole bunch of stuff, including this, to a large number of very awake and aware and concerned people, and I was heartened because, maybe like yourself, I didn't know anything about what was happening in Poland. People are very, very concerned. They're very aware that there's a problem here. It's being discussed a lot, and just now I showed you a document that had been prepared by a Polish, a very highly respected Polish medic, saying that this is completely out of order, it shouldn't be happening. The vaccines are likely to be contaminated. The whole thing is spurious, and there's evidence that this wave is sort of growing all over the world, and some of this has been caused by your own civilian initiative. Now, just to back up a little bit, somewhere down the line, and this may seem like quite a long time ago now, you lost your job, probably because of this, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I mean, to be honest, I can't even remember now when it was, but I think it was the end of June or the beginning of July. I was unceremoniously informed that I was not, the reports that I had been scheduled to write were not required, and since I'd been working there for almost 2 years without any complaint, and no reason was given, it was clear to me that this was connected with the fact that I had filed these criminal charges, and I also went to the US Embassy in Vienna and filed charges with the FBI. In part it was a symbolic gesture, because the reputation of the FBI is perhaps not the greatest, but if...
those charges that you filed, was it with the FBI or against the FBI? I
no,
understood.
with the FBI.
So basically asking the FBI to investigate?
Yes.
And you filed them at the American Embassy
here,
in Vienna?
Yes.
Okay. Now, some people in America have tried to follow the paper trail and said that they couldn't find any evidence that these these charges had been filed. Is it possible that they never left whatever room it was which you filed them in the American Embassy?
Not really, because I even sent copies by email to actually various FBI departments, because I'm well aware in the meantime that there are within every police structure these people who are obstructing investigations. So my aim was not just to file them physically here in the US Embassy, but also to spread the word around other FBI departments throughout the USA, and I think I sent them to about 10 or 12.
Okay.
I was also assured by an agent working here at the US Embassy that she had sent the physical charges that I'd filed in the official post or whatever to the Washington headquarters, so that was an assurance
And you
I
must
received.
have reference numbers and records as some kind of a receipt?
No,
or copy
to be honest,
no?
the FBI has not contacted me.
Mm-hmm.
I rang them and they informed me that I would not necessarily get contact from them, and the situation is the scale of my charges is just monumental in the sense that it kind of more or less alleges that the US government, pharmaceutical companies and banking cartels are operating together to push forward this mass murder program under the guise of offering people vaccinations. And so I mean, I would have been amazed if they'd handled it as a regular kind of complaint, you know, and given it a file number and, you know, all the rest of it. It took a while for the Austrian police to assign a case number to my case too.
Okay. The reason behind my question there was there are some people who try to follow that trail, and they've said that they cannot find any evidence that in the American system that they've tried to find these things in, that these charges have been filed. I just wondered whether there's any answer that you can give to that in terms of a reference number. This is where you look, this is what it says.
No, I can't do anything, Bill, because
like
I filed them. I have the evidence that I sent them to the FBI.
Okay.
I have the emails. And what the FBI did, unfortunately, is outside my control. If they haven't registered it, if they haven't assigned it a case number, if they haven't recorded it as it is their duty and requirement to do so, that's their problem, and I'm not responsible for their lapses. And that's it. And anybody who wants the emails proving that I also email the FBI is very welcome to have them. I mean, I think they're even up on the web somewhere. So,
to some extent, what you did was almost like a symbolic act, as well as actually initiating charges, which actually is I mean, it's not the kind of thing that most people usually take it upon themselves to do. So it was quite a valiant David and Goliath action there. But it was symbolic and it was encouraging to a lot of people. Do you feel that people have responded to you in that way?
Well, I think, you know, there's been, as you pointed out, a growing recognition that this really is a threat. And there's solid evidence that this is a threat. And this is something that I tried to lay out in the charges to explain the empirical evidence for my views. So people can read through it and see why I've reached these conclusions. So can the FBI agents, so can the police and so on. On the other hand, there's no denying it, these structures are extremely corrupt, and if no investigation is initiated, no case file numbers are assigned, it becomes increasingly clear over time that we, the people, cannot rely on these so-called police and law enforcement branches to do their job and to protect us against a threat. And this is what's becoming increasingly clear, is that they're not doing their job, that the evidence is handed to them. They're not, you know, arresting the people they should be arresting. They're not stopping the whole infrastructure for this mass vaccination program in spite of the dangers. So at this point, people are realizing that the justice system, the law enforcement system, has nothing more to do with justice and law enforcement, and that it needs to be rebuilt and reconstituted. And indeed, our entire societies need to be reconstituted on the basis of law and order, justice, the Constitution, if we're to have any hope of a future.
Just before we went on camera here, we were talking a little bit about the UFO phenomenon, which is something that you don't even pretend to know anything about, and there's no reason why you should. It's a different area. And you asked me whether I believed in that kind of information, and of course the answer is that we do, because we've extensively researched it. But there are parallels here, that whichever line of investigation one follows in these alternative areas, whether it's alternative health, cancer cures, free energy, the suppression of all kinds of information and government activities that have been taking place for longer than you and I have been here, you find that there is obstruction in the organization of our governments and our military and our intelligence services. You'll find that the citizens, if you try to ask questions, you just don't get anywhere. You have to be very dogged. And then there are all kinds of psychological operations that are mounted against anyone who dares to stand up against Goliath in the way that you have done.
Certainly true. I mean, I was aware of my working within the mainstream media that it is systematically controlled by a central group who have economic interests with oil and renewable energy or whatever, or suppressing renewable energy. But what was new to me was the insight into the extent to which the alternative media also seems to be controlled. And when I tried to do what I could do, which was file these charges, publicize these charges, I found myself attacked and accused of having not filed the charges, of not existing, of all kinds of lies. And the people who did it, I knew they were lying, because they had the emails in their possession which showed that I'd filed, at least with the FBI, I'd done my bit. I can't be responsible for what the FBI does. So it became clear to me then that these people were actually trying to obstruct justice and obstruct the discovery and action against this program, and that they probably have been put in the alternative media long ago to direct people's attention away from the legislation which allows mass forced vaccination programs. Most people I've spoken to have never heard of it. You know, they have no idea about the international health regulations and about the national pandemic plans that allow this. Somebody I know even wrote to the Austrian Health Ministry recently and inquired about this, and was told by I think a lawyer or a senior official that there was no way Austrians can be forced to take this vaccination. But this official obviously hasn't read the National Pandemic Plan and doesn't know about the international health regulations, which make it absolutely crystal clear that Austrians, in the event of a pandemic level 6 emergency declaration, actually have to follow the orders of the World Health Organization. And the World Health Organization can force people to take vaccinations and also to go into quarantine. So the extent of the ignorance of people about this vital legislation has astonished me. In fact, I didn't know about it till I did the research. And you would have thought that the alternative media would have been telling people about this for years, you know, and informing them about this danger. But it seems they haven't been. It's a big knowledge gap here that has to be filled.
There's a lot of items on the interest and agenda list of the alternative media, and to some degree, like any media, they react to what the big story is right now. But they have reacted, and there is a groundswell of awareness and understanding, which does seem to be reaching places that it hadn't reached a little while before. So something's definitely moving here, isn't it?
Absolutely. The way I see it, in spite of the obstacles, in spite of all these obstructions, the word has got out with phenomenal, unbelievable speed, which I would never have believed was possible in a million years. It's just been a miraculous kind of almost inexplicable form of communication, to my mind, which has taken place, you know.
If we see this as a game, and I don't use that word in a trivial sense, if you see this as a game, how is the game set up now? What do you think the moves in the game are likely to be? Are the citizens of the world starting to wake up more than was anticipated? What's likely to be the response? Can you think the way that they, whoever they is, how are they thinking, and what might they do?
Well, I believe that the speed of the awakening has taken these people by surprise and is making them extremely nervous and worried. And they have put in place this plan for the collapse of the economy, in parallel or in synchronization, this mass vaccination program, which is designed to kill or injure a large number of people. Then I think they have plans for famines and wars and various other things, and for moving countries under the control of the World Health Organization and the UN, which indeed would be the result of this pandemic declaration of one world government. I don't believe that they are very flexible and can see any way to back down now. So I think they're pressing ahead. They're even accelerating their efforts to get this vaccine into the population by stealth and secrecy. I think they're going to try and trigger a pandemic by whatever means they can in the next few days, weeks. They're going to be putting it up in schools, as well as injecting it into people. There was an incident in a Swiss train where vials of so-called swine flu that was supposed to be being transported to the National Flu Center exploded on a Swiss train.
Was that avian flu or
swine flu? That was swine flu, yes, in April.
Mm-hmm.
So we have some glimpse of the methods that they're willing to use to spread disease. Very, very curious incident why it was being transported on the train at all. And by accelerating this pandemic, by making it ever more virulent, they hope to panic people into taking the vaccine, which will make it truly disastrous and justify forced mass vaccinations. And I think they hope that the hierarchical structures and the habit of obedience will be sufficient in the panic and confusion that ensues to see them through this. That's what I think they hope and believe.
The habit of obedience, I love that term.
Unfortunately, we all of us have to examine ourselves at this point and ask how far have we internalized a habit of deference and obedience that is really not justified and needs to be, we need to regain our sense of our own judgment and reliance on our own judgment and our willingness to stand up against patently corrupt and criminal authorities and refuse to go along with it. And that's why I'm now thinking that what we need is actually a kind of organized, peaceful revolution so that we can finally take back our governments, restore our legal systems and our constitutions, and rebuild our economies, our health system and our education system, and put these people who are responsible for this in jail once and for all, so that they cannot continue doing this damage to us. So even here in Austria, I think the word is spreading and people are going to refuse. It'll be interesting to see how it works out. I mean, my hope would be that the movement reaches the point where the non-violent refusal will be more than enough to destroy and shatter this plan.
Some people have written to us and they said, look, you're not going to have a policeman with a gun knocking on your door accompanied by a doctor with a syringe. They haven't got the resources to do that. How actually could they enforce it if they wanted to? How could it happen? What would be the sanctions which they have?
Well, the French government released or circulated to the heads of departments an internal document of 19 pages which outlined quite clearly their method. And this is what I assume is happening in every country. They're going to set up vaccine centres that are outside hospitals and GPs. Some of these are going to be secure. People are going to be told to go there first of their own free will, and then they're going to receive calls, whatever, telling them to appear at a certain time. Then those people who do not come are going to eventually be collected and forced to go there.
Do the resources exist to actually do that? Because you're talking about transporting and enforcing and rounding up and making contact with hundreds of thousands of people, and possibly many more than that.
Absolutely. If so many people refuse, it will be impossible. But if they are assuming that the vast majority of people will either go of their free will, or when they get the call from, say, a police authority telling them to appear, or the notification, they will go reluctantly, but they will still obey that call. And the number of people who will actually refuse to go and stay at home when they're informed it's a criminal offence not to go will be very small, and it will be a criminal offence not to go. So they're assuming that the vast majority of people, when they get a call out of the blue, as is planned in Switzerland, that the police go through the registry of people who live in a canton, ring them up and tell them to go to the vaccine centres, that most will do it. And that there will be actually very few that need to be collected by the police. I think they have special pandemic police task forces there. They won't be counting too much on the regular police to do this. And they anticipate, I think, that they can go around and collect those people. However, if it turns out that hundreds of thousands and millions refuse to go, then they cannot carry it through. And that's why it's important for every single person to say no and not to go along with it.
So it's a propaganda war, or a propaganda game.
Absolutely. Right. They don't have the resources. They're relying on people going of their free will to these vaccine centres, and then they're relying on just being able to make a call to people, telling them it's a criminal offence not to go, putting psychological pressure on people to go, and then they're relying on a very relatively small number of people actually saying, no, I'm staying in my home, I'm not going on any account, and waiting for the police to knock on the door and drag them off. And at that point, they will have sufficient forces, if few people do it, to actually go around and collect people from their homes.
Now, fear and concern for one's personal safety is a great motivator. Are you expecting, just as in 1918, that there's going to be a second wave of the existing swine flu in a mutated form, which really is a problem, accompanied by very alarmist media reports showing people dying in funerals and all of this kind of stuff, that's going to scare people into lining up for their voluntary vaccination?
Absolutely, it's already happening. I think the scientists in Canada have looked at people who died from the so-called swine flu, and they found that those people have the damage to their lungs which is consistent with them having got the bird flu. And so how is that explicable? I mean, they must have been given the bird flu, so they've been getting it from somewhere, and it could have been from the kind of contamination of vaccine material that occurred here in Austria, where normal vaccine material was contaminated with the bird flu. So they're already starting and trying to trigger this really virulent pandemic. The CDC and the WHO has stopped counting or tracking these cases, so we could be seeing a multiplication of these virulent cases already now in the USA and Canada. And at some point the media will focus on it. They will focus on the terrible deaths of these people from holes in their lungs and whatever. And in this moment of panic, when the vaccine centres are open, they'll be saying, oh, those people who were saying it was the vaccine who got it all wrong, they were lying to you, it's actually the virus that's the real danger. And people in this fear and confused state of mind will think, oh, maybe it was all lies about the vaccine, and they'll rush off and get their vaccine, which will then kill them and create an even more virulent virus. So that's
something which I realised just a short while ago was that in order to really introduce something dangerous to large numbers of the population, they don't have to vaccinate everybody. And just to illustrate the point, if I don't get vaccinated, but you do, and so does your friend, and then we all meet for dinner to talk about it, and I say, well, I'm all right, I haven't been vaccinated, there's something now cooking in your bodies that I'm going to catch simply because we shook hands over dinner.
Absolutely.
So they don't have to get everyone, right?
No, I mean, I think that they would also like to use the opportunity to put in people these nanochips. There's mounting evidence that Baxter and so on is planning to put into its swine flu vaccine these nanochips, and certainly WHO has put in place the legal framework and the technical framework to vaccinate everybody. So I think they really are aiming for maximum possible coverage, but to kill people they don't need to vaccinate everyone, they just need to vaccinate enough people to unleash this really virulent pandemic. Eventually people will just put on their face masks or use their colloidal silver. Sensible people will already be thinking of taking these measures. If there's any threat of a virus, they'll be having their face masks on and boosting their immune systems with vitamin C.
And D3, I believe.
D3. And so to try and reduce the number of people who survive by taking these measures, I think they would like to get as many vaccinated as possible, because this will mean the disease goes straight in your bloodstream, and there's nothing you can do basically once it's there. Okay,
so what you're flagging up here is that there are two scenarios going on here. There's and this all sounds very black and stark, but there's the genocide scenario and there's the total control scenario, and they can go hand in hand with each other.
Yes, I believe that's the plan. The WHO has, I understand, put in place this comprehensive electronic surveillance system already, and as soon as we get our nanochips with all this information about our health from the health insurance associations or whatever, they'll be able to track us via satellite and computers or whatever they have for the rest of our lives, even if we survive the pandemic, the vaccination, the wars, the famines and so on. So in this way they will have managed to not only establish one world government, but also a technical structure to control every single one of us on the planet.
We've had it told us by a number of insiders on and off record that this whole structure just exists already. They've got the databases, they've got a lot of information on most people. They're doing all this for a reason. This is like the final match that's lit to the fire, if you like.
Yes, yes.
So my question to you then is based on what you know, because you must also have people writing to you, presumably confidentially offering information.
I've had a few private confidential emails from people who've been saying they agree with what I'm saying and with the bioterrorism charges, but because of their position they're not able to come out and say that openly, and obviously I don't publish that kind of thing either. But I'm not a gold mine of secret information. The thing is, it's all out there. It's all out there if you just read the pandemic plans, you read the international health regulations and so on. the reason why people are mystified is because the mainstream media consistently deflects attention from these key crucial facts, or put a spin on them, which misleads people about what their nature like, saying this pandemic is natural and caused by pigs when it's never been found in pigs. It's not new. The swine flu, according to the New England Journal of Medicine, has been, at least there was an article documenting cases of it in people since 2005, 2009. Wasn't spreading, wasn't lethal. The mainstream media is what's really mystifying, misleading people, and all I'm doing is looking at the facts behind the media and bringing them together into relationships so that people can see the bigger pattern. That's it.
What's the time scale, do you think, from here? This is the 8th of September, and we'll get this out in the next few days if I possibly can do, because time is of the essence. What do you think is going to happen as we roll on towards the new year?
Well, I think these few weeks are crucial to our humanity. I believe all the plans are in place to start these vaccination centres from October, and indeed people are going to be offered time off work in cities like Boston, 2 hours, I think, unpaid leave to go and get their swine flu jab. Kids are going to be offered it free or whatever, so everything's going to be done at first to persuade people to take this vaccine. And this already, we have to stop that. We have to make sure the protest is significantly large, that these vaccine centres do not start injecting children, the gullible, the uninformed, whatever, with disease which can then be transmitted to other children sitting in schools, to their parents, and then to the colleagues at work.
It's a perfect place to spread it all, in schools.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, in the army is another place. The soldiers are very vulnerable. They seem to be the first ones as well to get these mass forced vaccinations. So we don't have a minute to lose. It's going to be too late when the calls finally come through, the forced vaccinations demands come through, barring a miracle. So far they haven't managed to spark the virulent pandemic they hoped to. In April, I think they really hoped that they had set free a virus that was going to mutate and become very virulent, and they didn't manage it, and maybe they won't manage it this time either. But the more people they vaccinate, the greater the chances are that they really will spark a lethal pandemic. Bear in mind, Baxter's 72 kilos of live bird flu virus is still in the company's possession and could be put into the vaccines here. And if every Austrian or every third or second Austrian gets it, it spreads rapidly to Germany, to Czech Republic, to Slovenia, to Poland, and will kill many, many people.
Well, it spreads almost instantly nowadays in these days of modern travel. I mean, in 1918, people were travelling by steamships, and this is rather different now.
Yes, and particularly because of schools and workplaces and so on. So I think we don't have that much time. I think they want to, or reckoning with being able to move towards forced vaccinations towards the end of the year, maybe kind of gradually from November, December, January. But I think we have to stop even the voluntary mass vaccinations starting from October.
So, what's your message to people here? Because some people will be watching this thinking, right, I'm going to get my colloidal silver and everything else, and I'm not going to be vaccinated, and thanks for the information. But is that enough?
Well, I personally believe it isn't, because we're in a situation here where even if you have your colloidal silver and your face mask, your neighbour might get vaccinated, or you might be in contact with somebody at work. So it's in the interest of everybody to try and stick together and do things like protest outside the vaccine centres, protest to make sure schools stay closed. There's no reason to keep them open, or if kids have to go to these schools, they should be given face masks and other sensible measures to protect them in school from these viruses. So I believe that we should all be looking out for each other, because ultimately we're looking out for our own interests when we stop this pandemic from being ignited, and gathering speed. However, if all you're willing to do is take the colloidal silver and the face mask, fine, as long as you're willing then, when the order comes for you to take it or to go to quarantine, to, you know, resist at that point, or you know, be faced with being imprisoned or whatever. At that point, I would suggest it's getting a little bit late, you know.
Mm. How much support are you getting personally? How do you feel? Because you're like a lonely soldier here fighting this in Austria, sort of unconnected, at least physically, with the rest of the world. What is it that sustains you and keeps you going and gives you the strength to keep on fighting? Because it's not easy, is it?
Well, I have to say I look at the evidence and I see that there is a real threat also to me. I mean, I am also going to be one of the people who could be infected by this pandemic virus, or could be forced to take this vaccination, and stamped a criminal if I don't take it. And this is not a very palatable kind of prospect, and it's not exactly how I, you know, want to spend my time, you know, ill or sick or prematurely dead from something like this. So I'm motivated also by self-interest, you know, as well as the desire to see other people, of course, freed from this threat. But
do
also,
you have a team who are working with you? Do you feel supported logistically, emotionally, financially, or is it just really that you're just standing alone here in Vienna?
Oh no, I mean, I have Johan Niklasen in Switzerland has volunteered to put up my website.
I met him the other day. He's a wonderful man.
Yes, and he's done great work and put up a wonderful website, and you know, and a lot of people support and send emails and reports and information that I put up on my website and so on. Here in Austria, there's somebody who has an email database of 140,000 emails who's starting to send out information, so even the Austrians are getting to hear of what's happening. So I certainly feel not alone. However, there's no doubt about it that I, for example, have very little financial resources or whatever, and I, you know, more or less have to try and scrape by, and this limits how effective I can be. I can't cover countries or outside of Europe, or try and launch the kind of legal action that I would have wished to launch, the injunctions in places like Africa or Latin America. No substantial funding has come from any source whatsoever to help in this battle. So it's been individuals sending relatively small sums of money, or offering to do things like DVD or whatever, that has nevertheless been very, very important.
And you're personally contactable. If there's anyone watching this now who's able to offer material support in a position to do that, they can reach you through your website, right?
Yeah, so they can just find my email address. I am certainly very visible, I think, for anybody who wants to actually, you know, contact me. But so far there has been no foundation or wealthy person or anything like that who has offered support. And I'm not even saying they need to offer me personal support, but there's been no major support for any injunctions or any kind of these legal actions or for the movement as a whole. It really is a grassroots movement, and that's a heartening thing to see, that it has become very strong in spite of the fact there has been very little support.
Well, your work is an inspiration to many others, may I say. I think this really is a David and Goliath example that you've given a lot of people here. Are you hopeful? Are you optimistic? Or are you depressed about the whole thing, thinking, my God, we're all about to be wiped out here? Or do you think that it's just something which is going to work out well, but we've got to do a lot of work between now and then?
Well, my heart tells me, without any doubt, this is going to work out well for humanity. My mind looks at the evidence and I get worried. And, you know, unfortunately, I think we all have to play our role. It'll depend on every single person how the structures in government have failed us. They are against us. They're actually turning against us to try and destroy us. And it really is up to every single individual now to stand up, say no, and organize to remove these structures once and for all and open the way for us, every single person, to have a new future of dignity, of freedom, where we can enjoy lives free of stress, free of worry, as we are meant to enjoy our lives, and open the way for the next generation to have a proper, healthy opportunities, sensible working conditions, good education systems, and for humanity to begin a new era free of these monstrous plots against us.
Jane Burgermeister, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bill.
It's a good one.
Okay.
Okay, well done. Yeah, that was as good as I could have ever hoped it to be. I felt that. How did you feel?
Yeah, I also felt it went very well. So it all seemed to have been okay.
Oh yeah, it's a rousing speech. Everything's fine. The battery worked. You can. I can't show you what you look like.
I hope I look okay.
You look actually really quite fine. I have a second opinion here. Will you confirm, as a disinterested observer?
Well, because I don't often look so good on camera.
It looks nice, doesn't it?
No, very nice, Jane.
No, I can't bear to look.
No,
but at the end of the day,
good.
you know, vanity cannot play a role. Unfortunately, the YouTube video has to go on looking as I look, Bill. That's the fact.
And I know that problem.
But how you speak is heart-touching.
Yes, but I look bad. Do I have dark lines on
No,
my
you
Not
don't.
at all.
Actually, you
not at all.
don't. Actually, you don't. You look really beautiful.
No,
Very
usually it
super.
works okay
No,
if
very
I
beautiful.
if I look better on video than I do usually on.
No.
But I can't concern myself with that, to be honest. I have to accept that whatever way I look, you know.
Only woman can say how another woman looks beautiful.
Well, I'm not going
I'll
to
just
even
leave
look
the
at the
room.
video.
One will always say.
To be honest, I don't look at the video, you know, and I realise I have to try and look okay. I hope you're not still filming all of this, Bill.
Just in case there are any outtakes. But sometimes I just get a freeze frame or a little quote.
Okay. But,
don't worry, we're not going to do anything
at
against
the
it.
same time, I'm aware that I have to try and present a good image. I do my best, and if it looks terrible, there's nothing I can do, you know.
Yeah. Well, the way that it's worked for us is because we're so obviously human. People actually trust us. We had this wonderful joke, which was actually a serious email that we got from somebody about a year ago, who said, "I used to think that you were working for the CIA, but your videos are so unprofessional that now I know that you can't possibly be. Otherwise, they'd be a lot better quality. You know, they'd buy you more clothes, they'd buy you a different T-shirt. You know, so there's something
That's probably
that helps about looking like an ordinary citizen, you know,
Okay.
as opposed to some kind of a star putting on a polished performance with your auto
Yes.
cue here and all this kind of
Yes,
stuff. It's like,
okay.
forget it, we're people, and that's the message.